Hello students, welcome to the answer writing program. Today we'll be going to discuss two questions from internal security GS3 portion, and the topic would be role of external state and non-state actors in creating challenges to the internal security, and one question would be from current affairs. So let's take an overview of all the three questions. The first question is related to the terror drones, the second is related to the foreign fundings for domestic NGOs, and the third question, which is from current affair, it is related to GM crops and how it can help in addressing the food security challenges. So let's start from the first question. First question is, the terror drones from the hostile neighboring countries are posing a significant security threat to India. We have to explain this statement. So this would be the demand one, that how terror drones are posing the threat, means we have to find out how to the internal security. First demand is this, and second would be, we need to highlight the measures being taken to tackle this threat. So we need to write the measures to secure the internal security of India and how to tackle this terror drones threat. So in introduction, because the question is explicitly mentioning the term terror drones, so you can start with the definition of terror drones. So the terror drones are unmanned aerial vehicles which can be used by the hostile countries or by the terror groups to do some anti-national activity like smuggling of drugs, arms and ammunitions, weapons, IEDs, etc. And you can quote some example also, that there have been many instances where the terror drones are seen visible or are visible flying from the Pakistan territory into the Indian territory of Gujarat, Rajasthan, Punjab and UT of J&K. So this way you can set the context also, that by giving some example that this is how the terror drones are posing to the internal security threat. So now let's move on to the body part. The threats posed by the terror drones. First one is smuggling. There have been many instances where these drones were used or are being using to smuggle arms and ammunitions, weapons, drugs, explosives, etc. Then second is the cross-border terrorism. Again, this drones or the terror drones are being used to perpetuate this cross-border terrorism. The next is surveillance by the neighboring countries. Like there are two hostile countries in the border state of India, that is China and Pakistan. And there are again the instances where the terror drones are visible doing surveillance for intelligence gathering. Next is the terror drones can be used to carry out some propaganda, like by the terror groups, they record their terror activities in the crowded place and later they release the footage of that, creating the sense of fear in the public. The next is, these terror groups can be used to target some critical assets like the power grids, nuclear installments, oil rigs, like critical assets like the buildings like Parliament, Rashtrapati Bhavan, etc. So these are some threats posed by terror drones, internal security of India. The next is government initiatives to counter the terror drones. So the first one, again, there is no need to cram that what are the various initiatives carried out by the government in tackling this emerging threat. You can divide it into like at the various level, like what at the legal levels the government has taken the steps, at institutional level what the government is doing, and at the technological level, and at the international level, at the operational and intelligence level, etc. So if you find out the dimensions, that how to segregate or how to differentiate your answer into the multiple dimensions, then it's very easy to write the answer. So in this aspect, we'll see that what the government is doing into the legal aspect. Like government has come up with the guidelines, or government has some formulated this guideline. National Counter Rogue Drone Guidelines 2019. So this is the legal framework to provide some framework to trace the activities or to carry out some provisioning with respect to the terror drones. Next is at the institutional level. Government has done the establishment of Anti-Rogue Drone Technology Committee. So the institutionalization of some committee, so that this committee is established under the DG BSF, and it has the mandate to carry out the activities or to check or certify the effectiveness of the technologies which are there to counter the terror drones. The next is the technological advancements. So the development of counter drone system by DRDO to detect, to track and to neutralize the rogue drones. Then next is at the intelligence or the surveillance level. So the government in the border state via their security agencies or the security forces doing the vulnerability mapping and deploying the surveillance equipments and the special equipments to track the activities in the border states. Then India has already developed or deployed the integrated surveillance technology along the border state. Integrated means they have cameras, they have sensors, and they have the alert system. So they'll record, they'll update, and they'll track, trace, detect, and they'll do the warnings also. Then at the international collaboration or the cooperation level, what India is doing to tackle this issue? So India is collaborating with Israel into the anti-drone technological developments. So this way you can tell about the measures how to tackle this terror drone exigencies. Then finally conclusion, you can write some summary that with the emergence of the advanced or the complex technologies like this terror drones or UAVs, so securing our border and to secure the internal security of India is even more crucial. So this can be achieved via the institutional development, via the collaborative methods or the coordination, seamless coordination between the technological and the security agencies, so as to tackle the menace of these terror drones. Now let's see the model answer. Model answer is starting with the definition of the terror drones, then how terror drones are posing the security threat to internal security of India. Then next is how to counter this evolving threat. What are the various measures government has taken, legal, institutional, technological, etc. Finally, the conclusion that how to deal with this terror drone menace via the strong collaborations, institutional development and the coordination between the technological and the security forces. Let's move on to the second question. Under the garb of advocating human and environmental rights, foreign funding NGOs have been adding fuel to the internal India's security problem. Comment. So the question is already telling that NGOs do some work like human and environmental rights enforcement or to take care of this, but in the garb of these activities, with the help of foreign funding, NGOs poses a challenge to the internal security. So this is our question. We have to tell that how foreign funded NGOs poses the issue to the internal security of India. We have to comment, so we have to deal with the various dimensions. We have to discuss in detail that how this is going on. So in the introduction, you can start with the very first role of the NGO, whatever the question is already setting the context, that NGOs plays a very major role in socio-economic upliftment of the people. They try to help the environmental efforts or the environmental conservation, ensuring the rights of the people, etc. And to fulfill these goals or these missions or the vision of the NGOs, they require funding. And this foreign funding provides these NGOs the financial stability, widens their reach, expand their reach, and it also helps in promoting the expertise to carry out their operational and the other activities. So you can link the role of NGOs with foreign funding, or you can also tell some context in the introduction that India has banned more than 15,000 NGOs which are registered under FCRA from receiving foreign funding. So this was in the news. So every day, there is some international activity carried out by the NGOs and the government which are banning the NGOs which are taking the foreign funds. So if anything is related to this is in news, so you can carry out into the introduction. Then in body, first part is the challenges posed by the foreign funded NGOs. The very first point is the funding sources and the transparency. The lack of transparency, that from where and for what purposes this NGO is taking the foreign funds, it poses the challenges, or it poses the suspicion motives, that what are the motives behind this foreign funding. So it creates the suspicion in NGO's motive. And you must also understand that why the foreign funding poses some challenges with respect to the NGOs are concerned. That what are the cases that when there is foreign funding are there in the NGOs, that how it can create the internal security challenges. Like if any NGO is linked with any foreign fund, or the foreign, like who's whosoever is giving the fund, it means when the resource mobilization of that particular NGO is carrying from abroad or from some foreign soil, it means they have to abide by the rules and the regulations and the goals and the objective of this particular partner. So whatever they will say, they have to follow their ideology also. If they are against the domestic government of like India in this particular case, then they will also do some anti-national activity against, because this foreign funder is providing the funding to this NGO. So when the resource mobilization or when the financial relations are there between any two particular body, then that creates the security challenges. So this is how, if it is not very transparent that from where it is coming and how it is coming and for what purpose it is coming, it poses suspicion challenges. Next is divergence of funds. There are the allegations on the NGOs that they divert the funds which are meant for the developmental and the charitable purposes. They divert to enhance or to enact some anti-national activities, or like the activities which have some security implications. Then next is the political agendas. NGOs also promote some political agendas that have some anti-national interest, or that create some instability in the region or within the some communities. Then next is anti-developmental stance. There are the cases where NGOs protest or obstruct the developmental projects like the infrastructure or the industrial projects. We have seen in the case of the Narmada Bachao Andolan also that the NGOs, in the garb of the environmental security, they are obstructing the developmental projects over there. Even the tribal people want that developmental or the infrastructure project. Then next is the misuse of the protest. They exploit the protest and destabilizes the region or the communities. Then the security concerns in the conflict zone. They can also tie up with some anti-national groups, terror groups, or the insurgent groups and carry out some anti-national activities. Then next is government measures to regulate the foreign funding. Like the question has not explicitly asked, but if the question is asking about some challenges, that what are the challenges posed by this foreign funding, you can also write that what government is doing to regulate the foreign funding so that NGOs will be regulated so as to not carry out the anti-national activities. The very first thing is FCRA, Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. So this act is the primary act to govern the acceptance and the allowance and the utilization of the foreign funds with respect to the NGOs. So the NGOs should be registered with the FCRA provisions. They have to be registered and they should get the prior approval for the foreign funding. And when they are registered, they have to show their annual accounts also, that where these funds are getting utilized and from where it is coming. And also there should be some designated bank accounts in which they can get the foreign funds. And the reporting and transparency, they have to show to the government about the annual reports that where these funds are getting utilized. Next is there are usage restriction on the foreign funds, that these are some areas where the foreign funds cannot be used, like in the political activities, in the religious convergence, or the activities which hampers the integrity and the sovereignty of country. Then next is the blacklisting provisions. When the NGOs are visible or seen carrying out some anti-national activities or which hinders the growth, or like carrying out the activities which are against the sovereignty and integrity of India, the government bans the NGO. It means they are blacklisted and they cannot continue with the foreign funds. So these are some activities or the measures via which the government has put some restrictions or some regulations on these foreign funding NGOs. Finally, conclusion, you can write summary that yes, foreign funds play a very major role to empower the NGOs, and also the government via some regulations checks that the NGOs do not carry out some anti-national activities, and also it deploys their or it carries out their operations with respect to the social economic development of the country, not into the some anti-national activities. So this is the conclusion. Let's see the model answer. Like some context, around 15,000 NGOs were banned from receiving the foreign funds, and the role of NGOs. You can explicitly tell about what is the very first need of the foreign funds for NGOs to flourish, to carry out their financial stability, sustainability, expanded reach, expertise, emergency response, and the advocacy and awareness. Or because this is not explicitly asked in the question, you can also merge in the introduction as we have discussed. Then how it contributes to the internal security issues, then measures taken, and what is the role that the foreign funds provide to the NGOs, meaningful contribution to the society, and also the government via some measures checks that they do not carry out some anti-national activities and the funds are only used or allocated for the developmental purposes or the charitable purposes. So this way our second question is completed. Now let's move on to the third one. What is the current status of GM crops? First is status of GM crops. Then we have to analyze the potential contribution of GM technology towards enhancing the food security. Analyze means we have to tell that how GM crops enhance the food security, and we also have to tell about what are the challenges with respect to the GM technology as far as food security is concerned. So you can start with the definition that what are GM crops and link with the food security, and you can also quote some data that what are GM crops. GM crops are the crops where the DNA of that particular crop is modified via genetic engineering methods or the technologies for agricultural purposes. And GM crop has the potential to address the food security challenges. And also you can write the data like according to Global Hunger Index, India's position is 107th. And again link it with how this data can be connected or linked to the GM crop potential. Like India's hunger index is this. It means there are so much poverty and food insecurity, and how GM crops can hold the potential to address this challenge. So now let's move on to the body part. We need to write the current status of the GM crops in India. So all the activities or all the regulations with respect to the genetic modification organisms, all the regulations with respect to genetically modified organisms are carried out by GEAC, Genetically Engineering Appraisal Committee. And there are some crops like brinjal, tomato, maize and chickpeas, where like these are some crops which are employed with the GM technologies. Their trials are in progress. Only GM cotton like BT cotton, this is the sole or the only GM crop which is approved for the commercial cultivation, and it is going on also. Then next is GEAC, has given the approval for the GM mustard crop also. So now it is coming closer to the commercial cultivation, means GIAC under the Ministry of Forest, Environment, Forest and Climate Change has given the approval for the GM mustard crop also. Then next is the status of GM crop. It means we can tell some petition also with respect to the GM crop, that there is ongoing legal case into the Supreme Court about the GM food crops, about can we use that GM crop, or there is some like petition with respect to the ban of the GM food crop. So this is the particular status of the GM crops in India. Next is, we have to tell about how GM technology has a potential to enhance the food security. The first one is, as the GM crop holds the potential, means we have to tell. So the GM crops can be developed to produce high yield variety crops which can be or which are resistant from pests, disease. And when the crops are not getting attacked by the pest or the disease, it means the crop yield and the crop productivity will increase, thus enhancing the food security. Also, GM crops can be modified, or the crops can be modified via this GM technology for the tolerance for the adverse conditions, like for the drought resistant crops and for the saline crops, so that there should be a reliable crop yield. And when there is a reliable crop yield, means they are sustained, or they are sustainably getting growing in the drought prone regions also, or into the salinity regions also. It means there is a reliable crop yield, thus enhancing the food security. Next is enhance the nutritional security. So along with food security, we also see the nutritional security, and this GM crops have the potential and they can fortify the crops to enhance the nutritional value, so as to deal with the some micronutrient or the nutrients deficiency, like golden rice is addressing the vitamin A deficiency. Next is improved livelihood for the farmers. As with the GM crops, they are reduced requirements of the inputs, like as the chemical fertilizers, pesticides, they do not require, and or in the very less quantity. So it means their profitability will be increased, and if the profitability will increase, it means the enhanced livelihoods of the farmer and more income to the farmer. And when the farmer is earning more, it means they can invest into the modern agricultural technologies or the activities also. Again, the crop productivity will be increased after these modifications or the modernization, thus enhancing the food security. Next is the limitations of the GM technology. The very first is high initial investments. Because these crops are patented, they have to buy at the high rates, or the GM technology in itself is a very expensive. So high initial investment. So it would be a challenge for the small and the marginal farmers. Next is there is a very complex regulatory framework. There are the delays in the processings or allowance for the commercial cultivation. Then seed monopoly and the dependency by some MNCs like Monsanto. It increases the seed prices. Then emergence of the resistant pests. With the GM modification of some crop, the pests are also getting resistant for that particular crop, like the BT cotton, again get attacked by the same worm for which it has been modified. Next is, it has the concerns with respect to the food chain and the human health concerns. Then next is genetic contamination risk. Like if GM crop gets cross-pollinated with the non-GM crop, it means they will also get the traits of GM crops. It means the diversity would be less, uniformity will be increased, and when there is a more uniformity, it means there have the more vulnerability towards the pests and disease attacks. And when this cross pollination happens, this genetic contamination happens. And reduced diversity, pest resilience, biodiversity impact. And when this uniformity expands to the wild varieties, it hampers the biodiversity, flora and fauna both. Means it is contaminating the wild varieties also via this GM crops and the genetic modification traits. Finally, the conclusion, we need to write about the GM and the food security. So we can write that GM technology is only the component with respect to the food security. It is not the exclusive solution. So to enhance the food security, we need to take the holistic strategy like sustainable farming practices. We need to increase the access to the market and the credit to the farmers. We need to invest more and more into the rural infrastructure. We need to give a push to the food processing industries, etc. So the holistic strategy is required to ensure the food security. Now let's see the model answer. GM, definition and some data, current status, how it enhances the food security, and the limitations of the GM technology. Finally, the conclusion that what is the requirement of the holistic approach to enhance the food security aspects in India. That is it for today. Thank you and have a nice day.